Welcome back to Seven Moons Astrology. I'm Sarah Kirby, and today we are talking about my very favorite subject, living and planning your life by the moon. This is the best way to fast track your manifestations and ensure that you have the most harmonious, joyful, intuitive daily life experience. And we're going to talk about everything from phases of the moon to signs of the moon, a little bit about electional astrology, as well as menstrual cycle planning for women. We'll talk void of course moon, ways that I enjoy tracking the moon, and everything above and beyond. So we're going to dive deep into this topic today. I've broken it up into sections, so if there's anything that you're already familiar with, you can skip ahead, go ahead and highlight the time bar and take a look at the chapters to get everything that we're going to be talking about today. But first, let's talk about the moon in astrology, what it is, why it's important. I believe that it is the most important aspect of working with astrological energy. That is why my business is called Seven Moons. It is why I have the moon tattooed on my arm. This is my favorite part about astrology. What is the moon? What does it represent? Now, it has a lot of significations when we look at astrology, but the first and foremost is that the moon represents our emotional, intuitive energy. Simply put, it's our mood, it's how we're feeling, and it's our experience of our sort of gut sense of things. That's how we really experience the moon in this reality. Essentially, the moon is a mirror to our soul because it reflects the sun's light. The sun, by contrast, is our purpose, it's our soul's inner essence, and the moon reflects that light back to us in a way that is easier for us to sort of understand and experience because of its proximity to the earth. The moon is also really important because, and we'll get into this later when we talk a little bit about electional astrology and the void of course moon, but the moon is also essentially kind of like an antenna or a receptor for all of the other planetary bodies and their energies to sort of beacon and translate them directly to Earth. So it's kind of like a ping pong, you know, the energy from other planets hits the moon and the moon directs it onto Earth so that we see manifestation of that energy in our felt experience, in our lived experience. So I do, like to think of it that way. That's sort of a metaphorical way of understanding why the moon is so important in astrology. So when we talk about living in harmony with the moon, really why this is so beneficial is because I think what you will find is that naturally your intuition, especially if you are a female, because the moon represents feminine energy, you'll find that your natural inclination or proclivity towards certain activities, states of mood and mind, and your energy levels are really, really interconnected with the moon. So when we know where the moon is at and we bring our conscious awareness to its placement and its energy, it helps us first and foremost it helps us to trust ourselves, and everything else opens up from there. When you're not forcing yourself to do things that don't feel quite so aligned, when you're harnessing the energy to really take your actions and your planning and your day-to-day life experience to the next level, you just experience more ease and openness and fullness and inner trust. And when you have awareness of this energy, because it is so deeply connected to manifestation, you can really fast track yourself towards creating the life that feels most purposeful and aligned for you. So when we look at planning by the moon, the first thing that you've got to consider are the phases. So there's several phases of the moon. The new moon is considered the dark moon. It's the first and foremost phase. And I thought the best way to explain this would be actually to pull up the to pull up the zodiac and show you today's transits, because I'm filming this on the 31st of January here in Austin, Texas. Today is the new moon in the sign of Aquarius. And so we typically understand and see and visualize the new moon as being no moon in the sky, right? It's completely dark. It's known as the dark moon. In the chart, what this looks like is the sun right here, conjunct, meaning right next to, on top of the moon. And so in just a few hours here in the evening, the moon at 8 degrees will actually move to be exactly conjunct with the sun at 12 degrees, and that will be known as a new moon. So from the perspective of Earth, the moon and the sun are aligned in such a way that the moon is actually backlit. So we don't see it from our perspective. It's fully dark. It's not reflecting any of the light of the sun. What this represents astrologically is a time of shedding and release and rest and surrender. This is the start of a new cycle, so it's a very quiet, still time. It's the place where we seed our intentions for the lunar month ahead, the next 6-month cycle, and the next year-long cycle of the moon, right? So if I've got the new moon in Aquarius today, then 6 months from now I'll have the full moon in Leo, and that's the 6-month cycle. And then 1 year from now I will have the new moon in Aquarius, and that's the 12-month cycle. And I will have, I'm sorry, I actually said that wrong, so I'm going to backtrack. 6 months, starting over, sorry, Mercury retrograde. 30 days. All right, we're reset now. In about 2 weeks, we will have the full moon in Leo, right? And that will be the halfway point of the cycle before the moon is new in the sign of Pisces, about 30 days from now. So that's one lunar cycle. At the new moon, you can set your intentions for the next 30-day cycle of the moon. But when you set your intentions, you're actually also setting them for the full lunar cycle. So what that looks like is not just the 30 days ahead, but it also looks like the 6-month cycle before we have the new moon in Leo in summertime. And it looks like the full year-long cycle of this moon next year in January or February when we have the new moon in Aquarius. So really what this does is it helps you to seed what you want to grow over the next year of your life. And it works in phases like that. You'll get to the first checkpoint in 30 days, you'll get to the next major checkpoint in 6 months, and you should see a full return on that manifestation, at least in part, right? Because it depends how large of intentions you're setting, and sometimes it takes several cycles, but you should see full manifestation in a year's time. So that's what the new moon is used for. And it's a time where we typically feel that we need more sleep, we need more rest, we need to be more solitary with our feelings, connected to self, spending time alone, spending time in meditation and yoga. It's a very sacred and spiritual time. So the new moon is a time generally that it's not typically great to bulk your schedule with a lot of activities. It's not really the best time to be out socializing until you're exhausted. This is really more of a time to spend journaling and in reflection and in rest. And actually, all animal species have been found and studied to sleep about an hour more during the new moon each night, and an hour less during the full moon when the full moon is bright in the sky. And so we'll talk about that a little bit later. But if you notice that you are feeling more tired and like you need naps and you're just not as focused, and you could be also feeling deeply emotional and intuitive, that's all normal and to be expected around the new moon. And that looks like a conjunction between the sun and moon. Now, the next phase of the moon is actually the waxing crescent as the moon begins to gain light in the sky. So we'll see the waxing crescent as the moon proceeds, and I'm going to move by day now because the moon changes sign about every 2 to 3 days. So we're in Aquarius now for the new moon. And then we will move over the next couple of days into Pisces and Aries. The moon in Pisces and Aries would correspond in this lunar cycle only to the waxing crescent moon. The moon is starting to grow in light, which means the intentions that we set around this time are starting to grow in light. The seeds are beginning to sprout. And typically what this means for us is that we're still kind of in the dreaming phase, but the ideas are beginning to take shape a little bit more. And it's a really auspicious, beneficial time, especially as we get, a little bit further into that waxing crescent phase, because the moon is making a sextile to the sun. So you can see here that if I push the moon a couple days forward into the sign of Aries, that is going to be a sextile to the sun, which is a 60-degree aspect, which is known to be a harmonious, beneficial aspect, where we feel in touch with our dreams, they're taking shape, and we're ready to really move forward in the direction that we set forth. Now, a couple days further still, we're going to move into what is known as the first quarter square. So this would be when the moon in this lunar cycle moves into Taurus, and the sun and the moon are about 90 degrees apart. This is a square, and this actually represents the first point of challenge or crisis. So definitely this is a time where we begin to take direct action on our intentions. So you set your intentions at the new moon, and then you want to take your first concrete material action towards those intentions around the first quarter square. So that's about a weekish later, right? So you spent all that time dreaming and seeding, and now you're feeling more motivated, you have more energy, you want to take concrete action. But because this is a square, this can also sometimes be a period where we would call it a crisis of commitment. So something comes up to challenge you and test whether or not you actually want to move forward down this path. And whatever emerges is your first sort of universal test to see, am I going to keep moving forward in this path? Does it actually benefit me to move forward in this path? And you can decide from there what you want to do. That would be what the square is. And so we see that as being the moon half full in the sky. So then as we continue to move on, the moon moves into its next phase, which is the waxing gibbous, which is another truly auspicious time, a very beneficial energy where the moon makes a trine to the sun. That's a 120-degree aspect, beneficial, harmonious time period where we're really taking action, we're moving full steam ahead, things are flowing, and our project is growing, our intention is growing. We have, if we're still if you're birthing something large, that first 30-day period might be all about the idea taking shape, and around this time, you're really starting to get something more concrete. So then we move on, and when we get the moon all the way opposing the sun, so in this case, about 2 weeks later when the moon enters the sign of Leo, it will be in an opposition to the sun. And when it's in an opposition to the sun, that is a 180-degree aspect. And this is always an interesting time in society. People have a lot more energy. You might feel restless. You might not be sleeping as well. You might notice that you're staying up later naturally and not requiring as much sleep. You're jazzed. You have full energy. You feel on fire. You're taking a lot of action. You're doing a lot of things. People act wacky around the time of the full moon, and certainly things can come up to challenge you around this time. It's not exactly like a square. Basically, what the full moon does is, rather than it being a crisis of commitment, it should be considered a point of illumination, right? The moon is full in the sky, the light is complete, and it shines light on the shadows and the darkness. It shows you what you didn't know. It shows you what still needs to be considered. It illuminates problems and things that you missed that need integration into your plans, because an opposition is all about two opposing energies that need to be integrated. So the full moon can definitely feel challenging at times, but what it's all about is about showing you what else needs to be considered. And in some cases, it's about illuminating what else needs to be released in order for you to proceed on your path. And so as you move forward past the full moon, the moon goes into its waning phase. And as it's waning, the light is dimming, right? It's getting darker, and it's moving forward into its new moon phase, which is all about wrapping up loose ends. It's all about completing things, taking stock of what was illuminated at the full moon and taking action on those things so that we can wrap up our plans, and letting go and shedding and surrendering what is out of our control. Because as the moon grows darker, we're moving in again to a phase of rest, surrender, and release. So that completes the full lunar cycle. So what you're going to see is your energy is quiet and still and restful. And as it grows over the lunar phase, it becomes excited and full of action and outward extroverted expression of the energy. And then you return back to the new moon phase where you're quiet and still. So you want to align your activities and your day and your schedule over the month. Spend your time in a way that harmonizes with the moon's cycles, especially if you are a water sign, particularly a Cancer. So if you're sun, moon, or rising Cancer, if you have a Cancer stellium or strong lunar energy, because the moon rules Cancer, you're going to be moving with the tides of the moon here much more than other people. You'll have a deeper intuitive sense of these fluctuations. And so it's important for all of us, but Cancers in particular, to be mindful of this, because you might notice that you have kind of a 2-week on period and a 2-week moody period, and a 2-week lots of energy and feeling on your game, and a 2-week kind of in your feelings. And that is to be respected. You should work with that energy rather than against it. And we should all really try to balance our lives in a way that respect the phases of the moon. Now, there are even more things to consider when it comes to really harmonizing your life with the moon. And that's actually related to the sign that the moon is in. Now, this is where we get detailed, because we're going to be looking at the sign of the moon, which changes about every 2 to 3 days. So to show you that and to illustrate that concept, I'm actually going to pull up one of my lunar calendars. Now, these are available for my Patreon subscribers, and I'm showing you January's now. But what this does is it shows you what sign the moon is in each day and which energies are most beneficial and which ones are not quite so supportive, based on some other things that we'll discuss in the future. This is an example of electional astrology, where we choose days and energies specifically to support the plans we have out in the world. But this calendar is nice because it tells you what sign the moon is in, which gives you general significations of how you might be feeling and what sorts of things might benefit you to do on that day. So if we just look at the signs up here in the top right corner, that will give you an illustration of how they change every 2 to 3 days. And in one lunar cycle, so in one 30-day period, the moon will transit all 12 signs. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what each sign means generally when the moon is in them, and how you might be feeling and what things you might want to do. So in Aries, when the moon is in Aries, this is a time where we want to embody that Aries energy. We're feeling really assertive. We're feeling very confident. We're feeling very determined, self-oriented, action-oriented, energized. We want to move a lot, take a lot of action, get the projects done, lead the charge. We're speaking our mind. We're doing it directly. This is about initiation and following through with a strong willpower. But because Aries is associated with Mars, this can also be a kind of hot-headed time. Frustrations and anger can emerge, a lot of passion. And so when the moon is in Aries, this is really a great time to take a lot of action on projects and to direct that powerful, passionate energy into the physical world, getting things done. It's a good time for a lot of strenuous, intense physical exercise. And if you do those things, you will help mitigate some of the lower manifestations of Aries energy, which again is that frustration and that anger. If you're not really taking enough action-oriented, self-considerate, purposeful movement in the world, you might notice that that energy has to come out emotionally, and it's a time of frustration and anger and conflict. And so, transmuting this is all through getting shit done, and exercising. That's really the best thing to do when the moon is in Aries. Now, when the moon is in Taurus, the moon is actually in what is known as the sign of its exaltation. When the moon is exalted in Taurus, its energy freely expresses, and the more beautiful, harmonious aspects of the moon are allowed to manifest. So when the moon's in Taurus, we're really more concerned with comfort and security and stability and the physical senses and pleasures and delight and joy and beauty in the world. It's a very nurturing, safe time. Taurus is also associated with finances and food. So this is a time when we can find ourselves reaching for a bit more comfort food, and rather than berate and fight yourself for those things, it is a good time to allow yourself to experience the pleasures of things like food and the physical senses. It's a good time to look at your finances for the month. It's a good time to do your monthly financial review, for instance, or check your credit cards to make sure that you don't have any fraudulent charges, right? It's a good time to delight in cooking and try a new recipe, cuddle in blankets, take it easy, connect with nature, take a hike. These are the sorts of things that are very Taurus ruled. It's that earth energy, and sensuality can really emerge around this time. As the moon moves on to Gemini, this is an air sign that's all about witty ideas, curiosity, learning, the exchange of communication and conversation. It's about commerce and trade. And so this is a beautiful time to study, to do continued education for your job. It's a good time to plan a lot of meetings where you can expect to experience a lot of curious and open and also playful dialogue among team members. This is a good time to call a friend and to socialize. And it's also a great time to work on projects that are more communication driven. It's a great time to read or write and to journal and get your emails done, your mail, get that all out of the way. That is the sort of thing that you want to do when the moon is in Gemini. Throwing parties, attending social events, connecting with your neighbors or your extended family or your siblings. This is what you want to be doing when the moon is in Aries. In Gemini. You can feel like a little bit more spunky and witty around this time as well. But you might also notice an increase in nervous tension, because when the moon is in Aries, sort of the mental processes move a little faster and the emotions tend to not catch up as well. And so you might feel a little flighty or scatterbrained. And really, to channel those things, you're going to want to make sure that you are exercising your mind in those more Gemini ruled things that we just talked about. Now, the moon in Cancer is its home energy. This is a great time to connect with your feelings, right? This is a great time to journal and to engage in intimacy, emotional intimacy with other people, tenderness. It's a time to connect with feminine energies, whether you're a man or a woman. It's a time to be more receptive and open and surrender. It's a time to nurture your body with really good food, nurture other people with really good food, physical touch and care for another person, caretaking. It's a time to dive into psychology and counsel, give advice to friends, lend an open listening ear. It's an imaginative, creative time as well. Cancer is associated with the home and protecting the home, so this is also a good time to take care of your house, do projects with the home, do anything related to managing your real estate, caretaking your family, planning some special connection time with your family as well, have a family dinner. Make sure you're really spending time with those kinds of themes when the moon is in Cancer. We can notice ourselves feeling a little bit more emotional than normal, and depending on the aspects that the moon is making, this can be a positive or negative experience, but really it's a time for connecting with the emotional experience more deeply and intuitively. And I tend to find that taking a bath when the moon is in Cancer tells me a lot about what's going on inside. The moon in Leo is next, and this is a time when we're feeling more creative and authentic and lively and bold. This is a time of extroversion and playfulness. Like I said, it's confidence. It's really kind of a dramatic energy as well. We're feeling just really shiny and look at me. And it's a time where you're going to be more apt to express yourself. And this is a great time to spend going on a date. Plan your dates for when the moon is in Leo. It's a good time to indulge in your hobbies or any type of creative expression, especially if you're into theater and art. It's a good time to go to the movies. It's a good time to be very open-hearted and bold with your gestures. It's a time to get somebody a good gift or to do something where you're going to be seen. So if you have a big meeting, Leo is a lot of leadership energy. So if you have to plan an important meeting that you're going to lead and conduct, do it when the moon is in Leo, and it will go really well because it's a very authoritative sign. On the other hand, this can be a time where emotionally we're feeling an increased need for validation, an increased need for attention, and we don't get those things. That can cause some conflict, and we might be feeling a little bit selfish or perhaps just a little needy in that regard. So this is a time to give yourself the attention that you might feel you are needing. When the moon moves on to Virgo, Virgo is associated with logical, rational, organized thought. This is a great time to do your monthly schedule, to do some planning for the future projects that you have going on. It's a time to get meticulous, menial, detail-oriented work out of the way. So your PowerPoints, your presentations, your spreadsheets, those things need taken care of around the time when the moon is in Virgo. We will feel around this time a little bit more perfectionistic, and it will be easier to get things organized. So cleaning up the house, getting everything in order. It's also a time when we might find that we are having the urge to do something of service to other people. So lending a helpful hand, taking on somebody else's project when they're strapped, assisting people with things that they need help with will feel really good around the time that the moon is in Virgo. Any charity work or events can be planned around this time to go very smoothly. It's also a time where we can again feel very nervous or anxious or flighty or critical or judgmental of other people. And so we have a tendency to get overly analytical around this time and then have the idea that we know better than everybody else and take that out on other people. So watch for that tendency as well when the moon is in Virgo. When the moon is in Libra, we're much more concerned with balance and harmony among people. So we want to make sure that our needs are taken care of, but more importantly, that other people have their needs taken care of as well. We are really concerned with fairness and equality, charm, beauty, peacefulness, grace, ease. That's what Libra rules. And so Libra tends to really enjoy luxury, so this is a great time to plan a nice dinner date, go shopping for some nicer clothes. Home decor is something that Libras will enjoy, a beautiful space, a beautiful harmonious surrounding, get out into nature, and then also dialogue and discussion are something that is really good around this time, so connecting with other people is a beautiful thing to do. Hello, cat. So really you want to do whatever makes you feel most peaceful and in balance around the time that the moon is in Libra. When the moon moves on to Scorpio, we can become a bit obsessive and concerned with getting down to the truth of things. So this is a good time to do research if that's involved in your job, independent research about ideas. It's a time where we can feel really passionate, and it's a good time to engage in things like sex and intimacy because Scorpio rules those things. It's a time that is very auspicious and beneficial to business transactions, especially of the financial sort, but it can also be a time when we're feeling a little bit more fearful or controlling or compulsive. And so those sorts of manifestations of scorpionic energy need to really be looked at. This is the time in the month to dive deep into your shadow energy with whatever practices support you in doing that. When the moon moves into Sagittarius, we naturally feel more uplifted and optimistic, freedom-seeking and adventurous. This is a great time to plan a short weekend trip. If it happens to fall over the weekend, it's a great time to do something new, explore your environment, go on an adventure. It's a time to philosophize and listen to philosophical chats and consider your values, explore religious or spiritual topics, learn a course, do teaching. This is a great time to engage in all of those things when the moon is in Sagittarius. The thing to watch out for when the moon is in Sagittarius is the tendency to become preachy and lectury to other people. We can notice that we feel a little bit more inclined to self-righteousness around the time that the moon is in Sagittarius. When the moon is in Capricorn, it's all about responsibility and integrity. So this is a time to really get your shit together and take responsible action, committed action. So get the work done, do what you know is right to do, even if it requires a lot of effort and time. Do things the right way, not the fast way. Respond maturely, and be a little bit more strict and disciplined with yourself. It's a time to make sure that you exercise that eternal wisdom over yourself and the benefits of loving self-discipline. It's a time where you might notice your emotional world feeling a little bit cut off or harder to access. We can feel a little rigid or authoritative around this time as well. So just be mindful of those things. You might naturally feel a little bit more careful and calculated and averse to risk, and that is all natural when the moon is in Capricorn. When the moon moves on to Aquarius, we really feel a bit more eccentric and friendly and open yet detached. We don't necessarily want to engage in anything too deeply intimate, but we definitely want to socialize and get to exchange ideas, explore unusual ideas. This is a good time for anything having to do with learning or practicing the sciences. It's a good time for connection. It's a good time for doing something that is uniquely and authentically you and original without concern for how different or unorthodox it might be. And so really anything that you find to be unusual and special to you, this is the time to plan it. You might notice that you are more interested in things having to do with humanity and society at large, and the ideas that you have for what's best out in society. It's common to find yourself paying a little bit more attention to the political landscape around this time. And so just watch for that, especially if you notice that it becomes draining on your energy, that you might, you might see that this is the time that you can catch up on news, or you want to kind of temper that desire to do that if it's harmful to you. So you might be feeling a little bit more cool or aloof or avoidant, especially if people are trying to get really close to you. And so that's a natural expression at this time when the moon is in Aquarius. Finally, when the moon moves into Pisces, our intuition is on fire. We are very expansive around this time in a way that we feel deeply connected to everything around us, to the point that we can sometimes pick up on other people's emotions and not really understand that they aren't even our own. So our feelings can feel really all over the place around this time. You might be up in your head, imagining things, daydreaming, fantasizing, maybe unwilling to kind of move and transition from having head in the clouds to taking real world action. We feel more compassionate and sensitive around this time, sort of unwilling to acknowledge hardships or challenges in the world. We just don't want to look at it because it just hurts our hearts too much, because we're really open to a greater degree of compassion and oneness when the moon is in Pisces. A lot of deep intuitive downloads can come through at this time. We feel like the veil is slightly more lifted, and we can kind of discern what is going on in the realms that we cannot see, and have a deeper connection and clarity around our subconscious mind. We can sometimes see things in ways that are a little bit distorted around this time as well. There can be feelings of confusion and uncertainty when the moon is in Pisces. It can be a little bit murky. We might be more predisposed to taking on a victim or self-sacrificing mentality when the moon is in Pisces, and that can be some of the darker manifestations of the energy that should be looked out for. So when you look at this calendar as an example, you can see how the moon will cycle on different days, and that will tell you how you might be predisposed to feeling around that time. And then you should layer that again with the phases of the moon. So for instance, if the moon is, let's take an example here, where the moon is at the first quarter, moving from Aries to Taurus, we might have a challenge that comes up related to Aries or Taurus themes. So we might feel a little bit selfish. We might be hearing that we're being a little bit more selfish. We might have some conflict coming up because of, frustrating circumstances. That would be the Aries aspect of the energy. And that's where the first quarter is in this instance. The first quarter is in Aries. So there can be some kind of Aries type of conflict there. And as the moon moves into Taurus, you might notice that you feel a little bit more, for instance, a challenging aspect of Taurus would be feeling a little bit more self-indulgent or resistant to change and stubborn. That would be an example of combining with the moon phase with the moon sign. So the next thing that I want to talk about is actually the fact that you need to layer in your menstrual cycle if you're a female and you're actively menstruating. So skip ahead if this is not for you, but I think that this is valuable information for people who do menstruate. So the menstrual cycle is synced to the moon. And actually it's said that if you were to connect with the moon by looking at it just for a few minutes every single day for a couple months, sure enough, your cycle would begin to sync with the moon. And most women will find that their cycle is synced with the phases of the moon and is very regular. We have about, a 28 to 32 day cycle, which corresponds to the length of the full lunar cycle. And so your energy levels and your emotional state, your sleep needs, your appetite, your mood, all of that is going to fluctuate with your hormonal profile and your moon cycle, your menstrual cycle, as the moon will on Earth here in our lived experience. So to have an awareness of your inner cycles and to marry them and harmonize them with Earth cycles and the moon cycles will give you a really beautiful experience where you can access greater levels of joy and ease in your life. The majority of women operate on what is called a white moon cycle. So you tend to bleed around the new moon, which would make sense because around your period, you're feeling more restful, you're feeling more tired, you need more sleep, you need to be by yourself, your emotions are deeper and more easily accessed. And you might ovulate around the full moon. So that's the white moon cycle. You have a lot of energy, you're feeling really on your game, more extroverted, action-oriented when the moon is full of light. It's, like I said, the most common cycle of the moon, and it aligns most harmoniously with the Earth's energies and cycles. So this is a period of time where you might be in a more mothering phase of your life, or it's a time where you need to be giving more energy toward yourself at this time. Your sacred cycle, your period, is at the new moon time where all the energies harmonize for you to go inward and be with yourself. So it's said for women who are on a white moon cycle that that's really what that energy is about. It's about nurturing the self or nurturing another, especially if you're a mother. So there's not one cycle that's better or worse than the other, and you can actually change throughout different phases of your life. So if your cycle's not regular, or if you're not one of the ones that I'm describing, or if you want to be one instead of the other, I don't want you to worry about those things. It is completely unique to you, and there's really not one that is better than the other. There's not something that you're supposed to be doing. So I just want to say that before I move on to the next cycle. So the next cycle is the red moon phase. This is the opposite of the white moon. So you tend to ovulate around the new moon and you tend to bleed around the full moon. So there can be some kind of discord here, right? And so I'm a red moon cycle and I know what this is like from experience. When you ovulate, your hormones are really elevated. So you've got a lot of energy and you've got a lot of extroverted power, and you're feeling really on your game. And during the new moon, that's a period where the world is quiet and more open to spiritual wisdom. So that's contrasting, right? Because this is a time where you will kind of pick up and take over. You will have more to do out in the world. And by contrast, when you bleed, it's around the full moon. So that your sacred spiritual time of needing rest and energy or more sleep is around the time where the world is experiencing heightened full moon energy. And so this red moon cycle is actually said to be associated with priestess, healers, and witches. because it's about turning your sacred energy outward, right? At the time of the full moon, when you're in your cycle, it's a time where you're supposed to, you might notice that there's that increased energy of the world, but you're in your sacred place. And so those two come together. It's a time of sharing that spiritual energy outward. And this can change depending on the time of life that you're in. So there are a few other cycles. There's the pink and the purple moon cycle, and those are actually more synced to the squares of the moon. And we can sometimes see that this is actually a cycle that women will take on when they're in a transition in life, but you could just cycle with this very regularly. And so the point about this and understanding your cycle is to learn to harmonize your energies rather than fight your energies, right? So let's say that the moon is in Aries and you are you're on your cycle. So the moon's in Aries and you're on your period. Don't think that you need to lift a ton of heavy weights and do a ton of exercise and do all these Aries related things. Because if you're on your cycle and you're bleeding, you need more rest and you need more inward solitary energy. But that's about self-focus too. So a way to embody and harmonize with Aries energy that still takes into account and respects and honors your moon cycle would be to be more self-focused, be a little bit more selfish, be more concerned with your own needs, wants, and desires, and assert yourself, right? Ask that other people help you. That would be to embody, a way to embody Aries energy that still pays homage to your moon cycle. So I think that wraps it up on the menstrual cycle. So I want to move us on to the void of course moon. The void of course moon is a special time in astrology that was really pioneered by a person named Al H. Morrison, who did the more forefront work on the void of course moon. And then I referenced actually Judith Aurora Ryan for my studies on the void of course moon, and I will link some resources down below if you're interested in looking at this more. But the void of course moon is a period of time where the moon is not making aspects with other planets anymore. And so things that we do around this time tend to fall flat, right? If we try to manifest during this time, it doesn't really go well. And you might also notice that this is a time period where maybe you're at work and things are going well and you're on your game and you're getting your work done, and then all of a sudden you sort of feel a little unproductive. You can't focus. You're like, I think I need another cup of coffee. Well, it might be because the moon is void of course. This is a period of time where energy sort of dissipates and it's quiet. So technically what the void of course moon is the period of time in which the moon is no longer making aspects to any other planets right before it switches signs. So I'll give you an example of what that means in the zodiac, because that can be very confusing. So I'm gonna show you here. Now, okay, so the moon is at 15 degrees Virgo, and it's making a trine with Mars to Mars in Capricorn, right? So it's making a trine, and then it goes on and it makes a trine to Pluto, okay? So as it makes a trine to Pluto, what else is going to happen here? We move on, and we know that it's at 28 degrees Virgo, so it's just about to move into the sign of Libra. And it's not going to make any more aspects with any other planet before it moves into the sign of Libra. So now that it's finished, when it's at 27 degrees with Pluto, that's its last exact aspect. So as it transits 28 and 29 degrees of Virgo, it's done making aspects with all other planets. No trines, no sextiles, no squares, no oppositions, no conjunctions. And then therefore the moon is what is known as void of course until it moves into the sign of Libra. So this period of time can last anywhere from minutes to hours, and it's no longer void the minute it enters the next sign. So that really kind of depends what aspects are going on. And you can actually look this up and get void of course calendars to see when the moon is void. This is not the time to plan your important business meetings. This is not the time to take important calls with clients. It's not the time to start a new job, submit your resume, be interviewed. It's not a good time to have electional surgery, open a business. It's not a good time to host a party, to get married. It's not a good time to do anything that you really care about going well. What it is a good time for is prayer and meditation, yoga, rest, dreaming, sleep, relaxation, entertainment, watching TV, getting menial work done, projects around the house that you've already been working on, work on your desk that's been piling up that you've already been working on, things, just mundane things that you have to get to. That's a great time for when the moon is void of course. So I don't really, what I do with the void of course moon is I see, okay, well, when I notice, I don't track them normally day to day, although you can, and that would benefit you. But I notice that if I start to feel like, kind of feeling unfocused, I check if the moon is void, and then I understand that that is why. And I go with the flow rather than forcing myself to really try to get more creative work done or something like that. And I wait until the moon's no longer void. And then I notice that my energy and creative inspiration tends to naturally return. And if I'm planning anything important, I make sure not to do it when the moon is void. So that's sort of a beneficial way to use the void of course moon. The next topic that actually leads me into is a topic called electional astrology. And so what electional astrology does is what I was showing you before with these electional calendars, and they take into account all the aspects that the moon is making, when the moon is void, what sign the moon is in, what phase the moon is in, and they tell you when the energy is most supportive and when the energy is least supportive for all kinds of initiation and action and planning of the most important events and manifestations in your life. And so these X's, checks, and stars give an indication, and X is a time when things are a little bit tougher, and the stars and checks are auspicious energies that benefit you. Electional astrology rests on one very important principle at the end of the day, and that is, what is the last aspect that the moon makes before it goes void? So in the instance that I just showed you, where the moon made the trine to Pluto in Capricorn before moving into Libra, a trine is a harmonious, beneficial energy. It's an energy that would bring a lot of power and passion and intimacy and desire. It's an energy that would bring a lot of practical action and focused determination, planning, and hard work ethic because of the signs that it's in. And so that typically would represent what is the outcome of the thing you initiate. So if you start something, let's say on February 18th here, as the chart shows, when the moon is trine Pluto, that represents the outcome, which is a beneficial thing because of the trine, right? So that trine would suggest that the outcome that you have is something that is very focused and very detailed and perfect, and there was a lot of hard work put into it, and it is a very powerful, passionate thing. And so that's a good thing. But if the last aspect that happens before the moon goes void of course is something like a square or opposition, that can be really challenging, especially if it involves Saturn or Mars. And so that's a date that you want to avoid if you don't want a negative outcome, right? And that's what I do with these electional calendars here. The X's represent times where if you initiate, the end final outcome of whatever you're initiating might be something that's less than desirable. So that's what I use these electional calendars for. And again, you can find these exclusive to my Astro Tribe on Patreon. But ultimately, what is most important about this is to remember to follow your intuition above and beyond all else, because your intuition is actually guiding you towards your lunar experience. The moon rules the intuition and the emotional experience. So whatever you're feeling is probably par for the course, and you should trust that more. And if you begin to track the moon, you will notice that, oh, I really am moving with a rhythm that's aligned with the phase and the sign and my menstrual cycle and the void of course moon, and you can learn to live more in harmony with it and stop judging yourself or forcing yourself into things that aren't feeling aligned at the moment, and have a more beautiful, easeful experience. And so I wanted to give you a couple ways that I actually like to track the moon. There are numbers of ways to do this that give you all the information you need. So you want to look for something that gives you the phase and the sign, and the void, of course, at the very least. And so there's a couple apps. I don't actually like any apps, so I don't use any apps, but I've done some research, and some good ones would be My Moon Phase and Phases of the Moon. You can download those apps if you'd like to get them on your phone and see what's going on with the moon. But I actually like something that helps you to actually plan and connect with yourself and journal and plan your days. That's why I like the Magic of I, astrological planners. They give you a lot of amazing information about what each of the signs mean and what they represent to help you kind of correlate and remember what things would be good to take action on depending on each sign. There's a lot of really great beginner information in here that helps you understand the phases of the moon and what they represent. There are calendars for each month that show you the sign, the full and new moon, the phase, and also the aspects that the moon is making, which is really good. And then there's daily opportunities to plan. So I love Magic of I for that. And that's the one that I would recommend because I use that myself. So, okay, I think that's all I have to say on living by the moon. It's my favorite topic, and I'm planning to build a lot of courses on this more extensively to help you really harmonize your life with astrology and see where it can take you. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, a like, a subscribe. Battery died. I was trying to rush to finish. But anyway, I was saying, if you like this video, leave me a like. Let me have a comment down below. Do you plan your life by the moon? I'd be interested to know. If you're interested in my electional calendars, I will leave you the Patreon link below, as well as all resources mentioned in this video. Thank you so much for watching with energy.